Spring in that remote village lost among endless fields and rare climes always came with some special timid tenderness. Yesterday's snow was still melting, leaving behind damp dirt that smelled of earth, but the air already tasted of imminent greenery, and in the mornings the first birds returning from the south sang timidly. At this time, when nature was barely waking up, and people, thawing out from the long winter, were gradually leaving their homes, he could always be seen at the local village club. Husky, large, powerful, with thick, almost white fur, which in the sun's rays seemed to be covered in clay. He was nobody's. His name was Tarn. No one knew where he came from or where he went to spend the night. But every morning, as if on an invisible schedule, he appeared at the porch of the village school. Tarn was more than just a stray dog. He was a part of the life of this school, its unspoken guardian, its silent inhabitant. He didn't bark without reason, didn't impose himself, he just came, laid down majestically by the old wooden porch and waited. Waited for classes to start, waited for breaks, waited for the end of the day. The children, in their spontaneous kindness, have long since accepted him. They fed him secretly, sharing their sandwiches and apples. During long breaks, a whole crowd would gather around him. The girls buried their fingers in his thick fur. The boys tried to throw small branches over his broad back, which he, sighing lazily, immediately threw off. In his large, piercing blue eyes one could always read calmness and some ancient, almost human wisdom. He never raised his voice, never snapped, he just patiently endured children's games, as if he understood that this was their way of showing their affection. He was their big furry friend. But not everyone in the village shared this childish, selfless affection. Adults, more cynical and pragmatic, saw Tarn as just another homeless dog. Big, scary. What if it bites? Such whispers sometimes came from parental chats and conversations on benches. In the spring, when the days grew longer and children spent more time outside, someone whose soul was apparently deprived of any warmth decided to put an end to this. Anonymous complaint was sent to the village council. Short, dry formulation: a stray dog is scaring children near a school. Take action. The complaint went to the principal, then to the local police officer, and soon the news reached the parents. Conversations began. Something must be done. Voices hummed. Such a big dog, although he is meek, but children are children, anything can happen. Nobody thought about why he was so attached to school. Nobody asked where he came from. They simply decided, we need to remove it. And so when Tarn, according to his usual habit, came to school again and lay down on the porch, they were already waiting for him, neither with food nor with kind words. That morning was like any other. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink hues. The children, hurrying to school, greeted Tarn joyfully. Some scratch him behind the ear, others throw him a piece of bread. He, as always, lay calmly, only slightly wagging his tail in response to affection. But when the first bell rang, and the children entered the school, several men from the village came out onto the porch. They were holding sticks in their hands, thick, gnarled, clearly not intended for playing. Tarn raised his head, his ears perking up. There was confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand why these adults he knew were behaving this way. "Get out of here!" shouted one of them, a man with a stern face and a voice that seemed to be forged from steel. It was the father of one of the students, Pyotr Ivanovich, known for his harsh disposition. "May your spirit never be here again. Get out while you're still in one piece." The momentum was strong. The first blow landed on the ground, next to Tarn, causing him to flinch. The second one slid down his side, the third one lashed out at his paw. It wasn't just an expulsion, it was an exemplary punishment, so that he would remember, so that he would understand that he was not welcome here to break his spirit. Pain shot through Tarno, but he didn't respond with a growl or a bark. He just jumped back and pressed his ears. His gaze was filled with deep, unbearable resentment. He looked at them, at these people, whom he considered his own, on those who so easily betrayed his trust. What was visible in his eyes was not fear, but rather an understanding of what I had done wrong. Then, as if having made some decision, he turned away and, limping, slowly, wandered away from the school, from the village, from everything that he had once considered his own. His mighty figure melted into the morning mist, leaving behind only silence and the bitter taste of injustice. He left without turning around, without whining, only falling on his beaten paw. The husky, whose name was TRN, melted into the morning fog. For 3 days the village lived its usual life, as if there had never been that big fluffy shadow at the school porch. The children, in their childish spontaneity, at first still asked, "Where is Tarn? Why didn't he come?" But the adults, happy that the problem had been solved, waved it off. He ran away, where he was supposed to. They didn't know what real melancholy was. What does it feel like to be kicked out of the only place where you felt even a little bit needed? And Tarn perhaps knew this all too well. He wandered through the surrounding forests, hiding in old ravines, licking the wounds inflicted not only by sticks, but also by human cruelty. He felt physical pain piercing every nerve, and mental pain which ate away at him from the inside, leaving behind emptiness and misunderstanding, but something pulled him back. An unknown force beyond pain and fear made him remember those little joyful faces, those gentle hands that touched his fur, those words spoken in children's voices. He remembered the warmth of those touches, and that memory, like a tiny ember in an icy furnace, kept it from fading away. On the 4th morning, when the sun was just beginning to break through the branches of the trees, illuminating the damp shoots of the field, he returned. His side was bloody, his fur was matted, and he was noticeably limping on his paw. His husky blue eyes, usually full of dignity, now looked with special caution, as if he expected a new blow, a new humiliation. But he came anyway. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he lay down again, at the school porch in the very place where he had been beaten just 3 days ago. It was not a gesture of challenge, but rather a silent plea. And he didn't just bring himself. Carefully pressed between his teeth was a dirty, tattered plush toy, a small, once white bear cub, now covered in dust and torn threads. He carefully placed it on the porch right next to the door, as if it were the most precious gift. Then he moved away, lay down next to the toy, but did not touch it. There was some kind of inexplicable deep sadness mixed with hope in his eyes. The first to discover him were the cleaning ladies who came to Clean up before classes. They recoiled in fear at the sight of the bloody dog. But Tarn did not move. He just looked at them without taking his eyes off them, as if asking for something. They called the director, who, upon seeing the dog, only sighed heavily. "It's him again," he muttered, but there was no longer the same confidence in his voice. The sight of the husky, so motionless with this pathetic toy next to him, was too eloquent. However, an order is an order. The next day the story repeated itself. Tarn came again and lay down by the porch again, brought a new toy again. This time it was an old, yellowed ball covered in dirt. He was as dirty and shabby as the bear cub. And again he was beaten. This time it was a different man who came to help with the problem. He hit hard, aiming. One of the blows landed right on his front paw, and Trn cried out in pain, but did not snap back or try to bite. He only looked at the man, at his cruel face, at the stick which seemed to be an extension of his anger. There was no longer the bewilderment in his eyes that there had been the first time. There was only a deep, all-consuming sadness. He silently endured the blow and then, breathing heavily, rose and, again, limping, left. This time he didn't leave the toys. Maria Petrovna, a primary school teacher, a woman with deep wrinkles around her eyes and an invariably kind look, watched all this from the window of her classroom. Her heart was breaking. She saw how Tarn, this proud and beautiful dog, endured all this. She saw how his eyes, full of blue light, faded with each blow, but did not lose any of their inner strength. She saw him come back again and again, despite the pain, despite the humiliation, and she could not understand what made him do this, what kept him at this school where he was so furiously expelled, what secret was hidden behind his bloody side and silent patience. These toys that he brought, what did they mean? She tried to talk to the principal and other teachers. Well, he can't just come back like that. He's not a fool. Something is keeping him here. But these toys are not just there, but they simply brushed it off, considering it too sentimental. Maria Petrovna, don't wind yourself up. It's just a dog. He wants to eat, so he comes back. As for the toys, well, maybe he found them somewhere and is playing around with them. But Maria Petrovna did not believe. She had seen too much. In Tarn's eyes, she saw something other than hunger, something that was much deeper than just the survival instinct in his returns, in his silent patience, in those dirty, tattered toys that he carefully left at the porch. She felt some kind of unspoken request, some kind of call for help, and this call did not give her peace. Maria Petrovna was beside herself. Days passed and Haskader. Tarn continued to return to school, despite the beating. Each time he brought some tattered childish thing, a yellowed handkerchief, a broken pencil, a piece of ribbon. He would leave these gifts on the porch and then lie down meekly next to them, waiting for a new portion of pain. His blue eyes, which once splashed with ancient wisdom, were now full of inexpressible sadness and some kind of desperate plea. These moments he did not look like a wild animal, capable of frightening anyone. He was the embodiment of devotion, broken but not completely broken. He didn't snap back, didn't try to run away, just took the blows, as if it were a raft for an invisible, unspoken promise. Maria Petrovna, watching him, felt anxiety growing inside her, mixed with a deep, nagging feeling of injustice. She couldn't help but think that there was something more behind his stubbornness than just a dog's attachment to his feeding place. She saw how he looked at the school, at the windows, at the door every time, as if he was waiting for someone or looking for someone. This thought haunted her. And then, a week after the last beating, something happened that changed her understanding forever. The morning was cool but sunny. The children, as always, hurried to school. Their laughter echoed throughout the yard. And then she saw him too. Tarn appeared on the horizon, but not alone. His powerful figure, usually proud and independent, now seemed cautious, almost humble. A little girl trotted after him, barely keeping up. She was a tiny little thing, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, dressed in rags that might once have been a bright dress, but were now dirty, torn rags. Her hair was disheveled, her face pale, and her movements hesitant, as if every step was taken with great difficulty. Tan walked ahead, but constantly turned around, waiting for her if she lagged behind, and gently nudged her back with his nose, as if silently saying, "Go, go, we're almost there." There was none of the former fatigue or resentment in his movements, only concentration and boundless care. He led her like a precious treasure to the very heart of the place from which he was so cruelly expelled. The children, who had already entered the classroom, froze at the windows. Their joyful laughter was replaced by surprised whispers. They watched as Big Husky slowly, carefully led the girl to the porch of the school, to the very porch where he left his strange gifts and where he was beaten. The girl sank down on the step, trembling. Tarn, without taking his eyes off her, carefully laid her down next to the same dirty teddy bear that he brought on his first return, and then lay down next to her, snuggling to her with his big warm side, as if trying to warm her with his warmth, to protect her from the whole world. There was so much tenderness and devotion in this gesture of his that many children burst into tears. Maria Petrovna, seeing this picture from the window, did not hesitate for a second. She ran out into the street, and her heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety. The girl was pale, her eyes were half closed, and she barely reacted to external stimuli. She looked like a fragile twig broken by a storm. Tarn, noticing Maria Petrovna's approach, tensed up, but did not move from the spot, continuing to cover the girl with his body. There was no threat in his eyes, only a plea. Maria Petrovna carefully approached, knelt down. Her hands, accustomed to tenderness, carefully touched the girl's forehead. It was hot. She quickly assessed the situation. Dehydration, exhaustion, hypothermia, and deep shock. The woman immediately called an ambulance and the police. Later, when the girl was already being taken to the hospital and the police began questioning witnesses, the terrible truth came to light. Little Anya, that was the girl's name, had disappeared 2 weeks earlier from a neighboring village. She had run away from home to escape her stepfather, who was abusing her. In unbearable fear, she hid in an abandoned house on the outskirts of the village, in a dilapidated building, where no one had looked. That's where Tarn found her. How? Why? No one knew. Perhaps by smell, perhaps by instinct. He didn't just find her, he became her savior. He brought her food, breaking off pieces of what he was given at school. He warmed her with his body on cold spring nights when the temperature dropped below 0. He licked her abrasions and wounds, which, as it later turned out, were the result of beatings by Akim. And when Tarn realized that he couldn't find her alone, he coped that the girl was too weak and could not walk. He made the most incredible decision. He led her to the very people who beat him with sticks, drove him away, but who, as he apparently felt, could provide salvation. His unconditional faith that kindness does exist turned out to be stronger than human cruelty. When the ambulance took little Anya away, Tarn remained on the school porch. He did not try to run after her, did not whine. He simply watched the disappearing car. His blue eyes were full of the same inexpressible ancient sadness as before. In his gaze one could read not a plea but some deep, all-consuming knowledge. He did everything he could. Now his fate depended on those who had once driven him away. Maria Petrovna did not leave his side for a step. She felt that she had to be there. The police, called to the scene, began survey. They talked to the director, to the cleaning ladies, to Pyotr Ivanovich, who at first tried to deny his actions. But when Maria Petrovna told them about Tarn's constant returns, about his strange gifts, a teddy bear, a ball, a ribbon, and about how he brought in a girl who had been missing for 2 weeks, the atmosphere changed. Even the most skeptical began to realize that they were not just looking for a homeless dog. Volunteers who were called from the district center quickly joined the investigation. They knew about the lost dog, information that a girl who had run away from her cruel stepfather hid in an abandoned house for 2 weeks and was then brought to people by a husky who had himself suffered beatings, spread instantly. This was more than just an incident. This was a story of incredible devotion and self-sacrifice. In the hospital where Anya was examined by doctors, the girl was so weak that she could hardly speak. But when Maria Petrovna, who arrived with the police, leaned over her, Anya whispered softly. Her voice was like the rustling of autumn leaves. The dog knew that I could not walk. I fell, and it was very painful. He waited until I fell asleep. Then he lay down next to me. He breathed on me so that I would not be afraid. Her words, simple and sincere, pierced the heart of Maria Petrovna. It was a confirmation of everything she felt. Tarn did not just find the girl, he was her consolation, her protector in a world that seemed to have completely turned away from her. He not only brought her food, tearing off the last of himself, but also gave her what was much more important: warmth, safety, and hope. He breathed on her to drive away fear, so that she would not feel alone in the darkness of an abandoned house. He became for her not just a dog, but an invisible thread connecting her with life. Police wrote down her words, and then went to the neighboring village, where Anya's stepfather lived. Tarn's story became irrefutable proof of his cruelty and negligence. The girl was left in the hospital under the supervision of doctors, and Tarno was returned to the shelter. But now they treated him differently. His bowl was always full. His booth was clean and tidy. The people who had previously driven him away now looked at him with respect, and some with an undisguised sense of guilt. Even Pyotr Ivanovich, the very one who was the first to raise his hand against him, came to the shelter. He did not say a word, simply left Tar on a large bag of food near the enclosure and quietly left. There was no more malice in his eyes, only deep, painful thoughtfulness. Tarn's story, his silent feat, made many in the village look at themselves and their actions in a new way. Maria Petrovna visited Anya in the hospital every day. The girl was slowly but surely getting better. She often asked about Tarn, and Maria Petrovna told her about him, about how he was waiting for her, how he missed her. Anya smiled, and in her eyes, still full of pain, a weak but bright spark of hope lit up. She knew that she now had someone who loved and protected her, and this someone a large husky with piercing blue eyes, who brought her toys, trying to comfort her. Months passed, and Anya slowly but surely recovered. She was no longer that frightened, exhausted girl. Her eyes, although they saw the world in the dull tones of what she had experienced, now shone with childish curiosity. And Tarn, husky Tarn, was waiting. He continued to live in the shelter. His story had already become a local legend. The shelter workers and random visitors watched him, noticing how sad he was, but at the same time holding himself with such dignity, as if he knew that his mission was not yet over. He did not bark without reasons, did not impose himself, but everyone who saw his eyes understood that this dog was waiting. Maria Petrovna, the teacher, who was the first to see the pain in Tarn's eyes and who could not ignore Anya's suffering, made the most important decision in her life. She was alone. Her own children had long since grown up and lived far away, but her heart, always open to other people's pain, now belonged entirely to this little girl. One day, when Anya could already sit and even walk a little, Maria Petrovna came to her in the hospital and, taking her hand, quietly said, "Anya, I want you to live with me. Do you want?" The girl looked at her with her wide, open eyes, full of doubt and hope, and nodded. This was not just an answer, it was the beginning of a new life. Maria Petrovna adopted Anya. All the formalities took time, but she went through all the obstacles without retreating. She was ready to give this child everything that was taken from her: love, security, and a sense of home. And of course she knew that this house would not be complete without another member of the family. Takn left the orphanage. He was brought to Maria Petrovna's house, and immediately, as if he knew where he was going, he headed for Anya's room. The girl was sitting on the bed, and when Tarn entered, her face lit up with a smile. He came up to her, sniffed her carefully, and then, sighing heavily, lay down next to the bed. From that day on, Tan no longer slept on the street, did not limp from beatings, did not hide from cruel words. Now he slept next to Anya's bed, her faithful silent guardian. Sometimes, when Anya was playing on the floor, Tarn would suddenly get up, go into another room and return, carefully, not in his teeth that same, now completely worn out, but clean, plush toy, a little teddy bear with which he once brought her to the school porch. He put it next to her, as if reminding her about the past, but at the same time saying, "It's all behind us. Now everything is fine." He no longer left the toy and did not go away. He stayed close. No one dared to raise a hand to him anymore. No one in the village looked at him with apprehension. Everyone knew his story. The story of a dog who, despite human cruelty, carried so much light, so much devotion, that he was able to save a small, lost soul. He was not just a dog, he was a keeper. The keeper of the girl, the keeper of her peace, the keeper of hope. In their new house, where it smelled of freshly baked goods and children's laughter, and the sun flooded every room, food was no longer hidden, because there was no longer any fear that tomorrow would be worse. There was no need to stock up, to fight, to defend against invisible threats. There was only the sun penetrating through the windows, the soft rustle of the wind in the leaves of the trees behind the house, peace permeating every corner, and love, quiet, deep, requiring no proof. Love that finally gave them both the opportunity to simply live without the burden of the past, without eternal anxiety, without the silent obligation to survive. They found their world where pain and loss were replaced by tenderness and unconditional acceptance.